Imagine this. You wake up in the middle of the night, the air heavy, your head still foggy from sleep. The silence is broken only by the faint creak of old wood beneath unseen footsteps. In the corner of your room, where there should be nothing but shadows, you see the outline of a figure broad shoulders, tall, still, watching. You shut your eyes tight, praying it is nothing more than your mind playing tricks. But when you open them again, it's gone. Now picture yourself deep in a forest, camping with your family. Midnight falls, and suddenly you hear a shovel slam against gravel, a blood-curdling scream from the trees, and footsteps circling your tent. Someone is out there. Someone who knows you are inside, vulnerable, waiting. Or worse, what if the voice calling you from the bottom of the stairs late at night is not your mother, but something pretending to be her? What if the stranger following you home smiles, tells you he knows where you live, and then whispers from your backyard window, "I see you up there. Welcome to the price paid. Subscribe now, if you dare, and step into the darkness with us." It all began with what should have been nothing more than a simple detour on a long road home. I had been in Austin for a few days, visiting old friends, soaking in the familiar but fading memories of a city I once knew well. The return trip to Louisiana would take nearly an entire day, and I had resigned myself to the monotony of highway miles and quiet thoughts. That was until a message appeared on my phone, a reply to a fleeting Instagram story. It was Tom, an old high school friend I had not seen in years. He asked when I was leaving town. When I told him today, he surprised me by saying he lived just an hour outside Austin, right in the direction of my drive home. It felt like fate pulling me into a reunion, a chance to reconnect after years of silence. When I pulled into his driveway, I immediately noticed his house carried a kind of age that could not be faked. It was not decrepit or abandoned, but rather stuck in time. The wood of the porch groaned as I stepped onto it, the sound cutting through the quiet evening. When Tom opened the door, the smell hit Meej timber, a faint trace of something rustic, almost like a cabin buried deep in the woods. He hugged me as though no time had passed, pulling me into the house with a kind of familiarity that only true old friends can share. Inside, the air was heavy with history. The furniture looked like relics from the 1970s, each creak of the floorboards singing of years long gone. I could not decide if it was charming or unsettling. Maybe both. But with a glass of whiskey in hand and Tom across the table, it felt comfortable enough. One drink became two became three, and soon the evening blurred into warmth and laughter. The wall seemed to close in, not with menace at first, but with that cozy intoxication alcohol tends to bring. By the time Tom suggested I spend the night, I could barely keep my eyes open, much less argue. He offered me a spare room instead of the couch. I accepted without hesitation, stumbling down the narrow hallway, my vision hazy and my balance unreliable. The room itself seemed unremarkable at first glance. Old, untouched, the air still as if it had been sealed away for years. I barely noticed anything else before collapsing onto the bed. Drunken exhaustion pulled me under almost instantly, but sleep in a strange place has its own way of betraying you. I woke sometime in the night, my throat dry, head pounding, the faint glow of moonlight leaking through the blinds. That is when I saw it. At first I thought it was nothing a coat, maybe, draped over a rack, a dark shape in the far corner, hanging in front of the closet door. But as my eyes adjusted, the shape seemed wrong. It was broad at the top, tapering down in a way that looked disturbingly like shoulders, not fabric. It was standing, not hanging. I told myself I was drunk, that it was just a trick of light and shadow. I shut my eyes tight, tried to force sleep, but when I peeked again, it was still there, unmoving, watching. My heart thudded in my chest so hard I could feel it in my throat. I rolled over, away from the corner, convincing myself that ignoring it was the best I could do. Somehow, despite my terror, exhaustion dragged me back into unconsciousness. But I woke again, this time to sound. Slow, deliberate creaks, as though someone were tiptoeing across the ancient wood floors, careful but unable to mask the noise completely. Dawn was starting to bleed into the blinds, filling the room with dim light. I looked toward the corner. The figure was gone. I bolted upright, head spinning, body trembling. The closet door stood empty. No coat, no shape, nothing. A flood of icy dread filled me, and I rushed down the hall to Tom's room. He was out cold, snoring like a man dead to the world. I shook him awake, panic spilling from me as I stammered about the coat, the figure. His confusion only deepened my fear. He swore he did not own a trench coat. He swore he did not even have a coat rack in that room. When I dragged him to see for himself, his face was blank, but not mocking. There was no joke hiding behind his eyes. He seemed as unsettled as I was, though he tried to convince me maybe it had been a dream. We searched the house together. Every room, every closet, every corner. Nothing. No forced entry, no sign of an intruder, nothing that could explain what I saw. But I knew what I saw. The shape, the sound, the disappearance. It was too real, too sharp in my memory. Tom dismissed it with nervous laughter, but the silence of that house pressed against me like a weight. Something was wrong, even if I could not prove it. By the time the sun fully rose, I was ready to leave. My bag was packed in minutes, my goodbyes rushed. Tom tried to reassure me, but there was no comfort left to give. Driving back toward Louisiana, the image replayed over and over in my head, the silhouette in the corner, the deliberate footsteps, the absence of anything that could explain it. Maybe Tom was right, maybe it was just the alcohol twisting my senses. But deep down, I did not believe that. Deep down, I was certain someone had been in that room, standing in the shadows, watching me sleep. And whoever they were, they had left before the light of morning exposed them. That certainty lingers even now. It is a thought that festers, that gnaws at the edge of reason. Because if there was someone there, silent, waiting in the dark, then they left only because they wanted to, not because they had to. And that possibility, more than anything else, chills me to my core. The story of that night in Sweden has never left me, even though years have passed since it happened. I was 18, old enough to think I knew what danger was, old enough to believe my parents' presence meant nothing could truly harm me. That belief was stripped away in a single night under the black canopy of a Scandinavian forest. We had set out on what was supposed to be a lighthearted family trip. My parents, myself, and a close friend of mine named Anna had driven nearly 8 hours to visit a theme park. The plan was simple: spend a day there, camp nearby, and return home with good memories. We had tents packed, snacks ready, and a sense of adventure pushing us forward. But plans have a way of unraveling when you least expect them. When we arrived in the city, we discovered the campsite near the park was fully booked. A massive soccer tournament had filled every space, every bed, every plot of grass reserved. Call after call to other campsites ended in the same answer: full. Our only option was the wilderness itself. With stubborn optimism, my dad directed us toward a nature reserve, parking our car in a gravel lot surrounded by dense woods. A few hikers we passed said it was fine to stay the night, that no one would bother us. It felt isolated but manageable. The air was crisp as evening fell. We worked hard to set up our tents, my parents in one, and Anna and I in another. The nylon fabric stretched and staked as the light dimmed. The forest was quiet but alive with small noises, branches snapping under unseen weight, leaves rustling, birds giving their final calls before night. Nearby, in the far corner of the lot, there was a car. Rusted, dented, windows smeared with dirt. Empty, abandoned. At least that was how it seemed. I noticed it in passing, thought it odd, but dismissed it. By 11, Anna and I were curled up in our tent, glowing phone screens illuminating our tired faces. We laughed at videos, scrolled past endless TikToks, ate junk food until the world outside seemed to disappear. Midnight crept up silently, and we finally decided to sleep. My parents had long since dozed off, the rhythmic sound of their snores faintly reaching us. Then came the noise, a sharp metallic crash, unmistakable. It was the sound of something heavy hitting gravel. A shovel, I thought immediately. My skin prickled. Anna's wide eyes told me she had heard it too. The noise came from the direction of the abandoned car. Before we could whisper about what to do, another sound followed, the clatter of metal being shoved into a trunk, and then the slam of it closing. Moments later, the engine roared to life, and the car sped away. We sat frozen in silence, listening to the night settle again. My phone shook in my hand as I texted a friend from a nearby city, telling him where we were. His reply was immediate, and it chilled me worse than the night air. That beach near you is dangerous. Organized crime. People go missing there. I felt the blood drain from my face. But the worst was still to come. 10 minutes passed. Our breaths slowed. We almost convinced ourselves it was over. And then a scream ripped through the forest. A man's voice, raw and guttural, a sound so violent it felt less human and more animal. It tore through the stillness and left us paralyzed. Anna gripped my arm with shaking hands. I texted my mother, desperate, but there was no reply. I called her phone. Groggy, she answered, claiming she had heard nothing. She reassured me, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. We lay down, clutching the thin blankets like they could shield us from whatever nightmare prowled outside. Minutes dragged by like hours. Then came the footsteps. They were deliberate, measured, circling, first around our tent, then my parents, then the car. Whoever it was, they were studying us, deciding something. The gravel crunched softly, closer, closer. My heart thundered so loudly I thought whoever was out there must hear it. Then silence. That silence was worse than the steps themselves. Headlights cut through the trees. The abandoned car had returned. Its beam swept over our thin tent walls, illuminating our shapes inside. We flattened ourselves to the ground, praying to be invisible. The engine revved. Then the car sped away again. 5 minutes later, blue lights flashed in the distance.
Are you ready?
A police car tore down the same road, chasing the darkness. The rest of the night was unbearable. Anna and I fled to the car, locking ourselves inside, trying to find comfort in the thin metal doors between us and the unknown. I stayed awake until dawn, eyes darting at every shadow. Anna eventually drifted off, but I could not. Every sound was amplified, every rustle in the trees a threat. When morning finally came, we packed as quickly as possible. My mother revealed quietly that she too had heard the footsteps. Worse, she had heard breathing. Heavy, labored inches from her tent wall. She had stayed silent to avoid terrifying us, but now her pale face said everything. My father had slept through it all, blissfully unaware. Before we left, I searched the forest online, hoping to put the night behind me with facts. What I found destroyed that hope. Weeks earlier, a man had been stabbed to death in that very reserve, tied to gang-related deaths. 2 others had vanished from the same beach, never to be found. I cannot shake the thought. The footsteps, the scream, the shovel. Was someone bearing evidence? Was someone checking if we had seen too much? If the police had not been nearby, would we have been silenced too? That night taught me that danger does not always come with warning. Sometimes it waits quietly in the dark, circling your tent, breathing just outside the thin fabric that separates you from the unknown. There are memories from childhood that fade like smoke, and then there are those that cling to you, sharp and unshakable, etched into your mind as if they happened yesterday. This story belongs to the latter. I was 6 years old. My brother Keith was 8. And though we were young, that night taught us a lesson about fear that no child should ever learn. Our family lived in a modest 2-story home. The upstairs was ours, Keith, and I shared a large bedroom at the end of the hall. My parents' room was downstairs, separated by a staircase that creaked loudly no matter how careful you were. At that age, bedtime was strict. 8:30 sharp. No excuses. If Dad caught us awake past then, punishment was certain. So when Keith shook me awake in the middle of the night, I thought for sure we were in trouble. But his whisper told me otherwise. "Listen," he said. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, annoyed. But then I heard it. A voice. A whisper coming from downstairs. At first I felt relief it was Mom. She was calling us, saying our names softly. Keith and Mikey. Her tone was gentle, almost too gentle, like a lullaby spoken through clenched teeth. I started to get out of bed, eager to obey. But Keith grabbed my wrist. His face was pale, his eyes wide with something I didn't yet understand. "That's not Mom," he whispered. I argued. Of course. Who else could it be? The voice was identical to hers. The cadence, the softness, the exact way she said our names. But Keith shook his head firmly, urging me closer to the door. I pressed my ear against the wood. The voice came again, clearer now. "Keith, Mikey, come down." Every hair on my body stood on end. It was her voice, but it was wrong. Something in the way it lingered on the words, the way it drew them out, made it feel hollow. I wanted to believe Keith was just scaring me. But when I carefully unlatched the door and peered down the hall toward the stairwell, the truth shattered me. Through the narrow crack of the stairway door, I saw her, a figure at the bottom of the stairs. A woman's silhouette, framed in the faint light of the downstairs lamp. She was standing perfectly still, head tilted upward, as if waiting for me. And when she noticed me watching, she spoke. "Hi, sweetie. Come down." The voice was honeyed, almost kind. But in that moment, every instinct screamed that it was not my mother. My stomach knotted, and I slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling fingers. I ran back to our room, tears streaming down my face.
Please, respond.
Keith looked at me and simply said, "I told you. We locked our bedroom door too, something we had never done before." Then we made a pact. We would scream as loud as we could, stomp on the floor, make such a commotion that our parents would have no choice but to come. On the count of 3, we did exactly that. Our combined screams echoed through the house like sirens. Within moments, our parents were at the door, pounding, demanding we open up. Dad was angry at first, furious that we had locked ourselves in. But when he saw my face wet with tears, his tone shifted. Mom rushed to our bedsides, asking us what happened. We told her. Every detail, the voice, the woman, the way she knew our names. Mom's face changed, her usual calm replaced with something I had never seen before: genuine alarm. She insisted it wasn't her. She hadn't called us. She hadn't been downstairs at all. Dad didn't waste a second. He stormed down the stairs, searching the house. Doors slammed open. Closets were checked. Locks rattled. The silence that followed was suffocating. When he returned, his face was unreadable. He claimed he found nothing. No open windows. No signs of entry. But the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. Not long after, a knock at the door made us all jump. Red and blue lights flashed outside the window. A police car. Our parents spoke in hushed voices with the officers while Keith and I tried to catch glimpses from the upstairs window. We begged them afterward to explain. Who was she? How did she know our names? What did she want? But their answers were vague, evasive. They said they didn't know. They said we were brave for not going downstairs. Even at 6, I could feel the weight of a secret pressing against their silence. It wasn't the ignorance of not knowing. It was the heaviness of choosing not to say. Mom's hand trembled when she tucked me in that night, and Dad lingered by the door longer than usual, as if waiting for something to happen again. Years later, when I was older, I asked them about it. I thought adulthood would finally unlock the truth, but they only shrugged it off, called it a random intruder, insisted we were safe now. Safe. That word has never meant the same thing to me since.
Because here's the truth I cannot shake. The woman at the bottom of the stairs didn't just call for us. She didn't just mimic my mother's voice. She knew our names. She knew exactly who we were.
And sometimes, late at night, when the house creaks and the air feels too still, I wonder if she ever really left, or if she is still out there, waiting for the night when someone finally answers her call. When I think back on my teenage years, I mostly remember the ordinary thing: school, friends, small dramas that seemed enormous at the time. But there is one night that split my youth into a before and after. One night that left me afraid, not just of strangers, but of my own home. I was 16, a high school student without a car. That meant I was either walking or relying on my mother for rides. That weekend, my friend Haley was having a small get-together at her house. It was supposed to be just us girls, me, Haley, and a few of our friends. Nothing big, nothing complicated. My mom drove me over as the sun was going down, telling me as always to text her if plans changed. She was a single mom who also liked to go out, and she mentioned she might be late getting back, which meant I'd have to find my own way home. It wasn't a big deal. Haley lived close enough that I could walk if needed. For a while, everything was fine. We hung out in Haley's backyard, laughed about school gossip, ate snacks, and enjoyed the summer night. Then, unexpectedly, some boys from our school showed up. Haley hadn't told me she invited them, and among them was one boy I had history with. Someone I didn't want to see. Haley thought she was being clever, trying to force some kind of reconciliation, but I just felt cornered. I lasted as long as I could, then decided to leave. It was late, but not too late. The kind of hour where neighborhoods grow quiet, but the air still feels warm. I texted Haley that I was heading home and started walking. My route wasn't straight. I had to turn down several intersecting roads to reach my house. About 5 minutes into the walk, I noticed footsteps behind me. At first, I dismissed it as coincidence. People walked at night. It wasn't unusual. But when I slowed down, the footsteps slowed too. When I turned around, I saw him. A middle-aged man, hood pulled up, hands shoved into the front pocket of his sweatshirt. He smiled at me like he knew me. "How you doing?" he said. I replied with a clipped hi, and turned back around, walking faster. For the next 5 minutes, I kept glancing over my shoulder. Every time he was still there. Not too close, but close enough. I texted my friends frantically, asking if someone could come get me. The boy I had tried so hard to avoid, let's call him Brandon, offered to pick me up. He was already on his way. Meanwhile, the man behind me tried to make small talk. "Isn't it such a nice night?" "Love this weather," he said. "Yeah," I muttered, not turning around. Then, "You from the neighborhood?" "No." My answer was sharp, meant to shut him down. He chuckled. The sound made my skin crawl. I could feel him getting closer with every turn I made, as if the streets were funneling us together. My phone buzzed Brandon, telling me he was almost there. I clung to that message like a lifeline, and then the man said something that shattered the thin layer of composure I had left. "I'm not going to hurt you. You live by the elementary school, right?" I stopped in my tracks and turned to face him. His smile had changed. It was no longer friendly, but something else, something predatory. My voice cracked as I screamed, "Leave me alone!" and then I ran. He ran too. I could hear his footsteps pounding the pavement behind me, gaining. I screamed again, louder this time, calling for help, calling for anyone. Lights flicked on in nearby houses. The man's voice rose behind me. No longer sweet, but snarling. "Shut up, you little." But he didn't finish. He veered off, disappearing into the darkness between two houses. I kept running until I saw a couple standing on their porch, drawn out by my screams. Breathless, I explained what happened. They stayed with me until Brandon pulled up. It was only a minute's drive, but it felt like an eternity. When we reached my house, my mom wasn't home. She wasn't answering her phone. I didn't want to be alone, so I asked Brandon to stay. He agreed, and for a while we sat in the living room, trying to process what had just happened. Then came the sound of footsteps. We were upstairs, my room facing the backyard. We heard the gate creak open. My mom never used the backyard gate. Brandon and I looked at each other, neither of us daring to speak. The night outside was silent, but we knew someone was there. We waited for movement, for a face, for any sign, and then a voice floated up from below. A man's voice. "I see you up there." I gasped and stepped back from the window. Brandon shouted something out threatening to call the police, telling the man to leave. We did call the police. My hands shook so badly that Brandon had to give most of the details. When the officers arrived, the man was gone. We gave them a description, but I knew even then it wouldn't matter. He had vanished into the night like a shadow. My mom came home soon after, frantic and angry at herself for not being there. The police parked a cruiser on our block for a few hours as a deterrent, but no one was ever caught. I never walked at night again. I avoided even the backyard. My mom called my uncle to install a security system, big, obvious cameras meant to scare away anyone who might come back. But even that didn't erase the feeling. I would lie awake at night, imagining the man's face, the way he smiled, the way he said, "I see you up there." A year later, my mom sold the house. She said it was for a fresh start. I think it was because every time she looked at me, she saw the fear still living there, the fear of knowing someone out there knew who I was, where I lived, and how to find me. The worst part is not knowing. Not knowing who he was, not knowing why he followed me, not knowing if he's still out there. Sometimes I dream that he is still walking those same suburban streets, hood up, smiling, waiting for someone else to walk by alone, waiting to whisper, "I see you up there," to another girl who thinks she's almost home. When you look back at these 4 stories, it is easy to dismiss them as coincidences, tricks of the light, or dreams twisted by exhaustion. A coat that was not really there. A scream in the woods with no clear source. A voice that sounded too much like a mother's. A stranger who knew too much about where a teenage girl lived. But when you put them together, a darker truth emerges. Safety is fragile. The places we think of as familiar, comforting, and protective can turn into the stage for terror in an instant. The first story reminds us that even a friend's home, a place you enter with trust, can hold secrets you do not expect. Whether it was a shadow, an intruder, or something else entirely, the fact remains. The narrator woke to find a presence that vanished without explanation. Sometimes danger does not knock at the door. Sometimes it waits in the corner of the room. The second story reveals how easily innocence can collide with violence. A family trip meant for fun became a brush with organized crime. The sound of a shovel, the scream in the night, the heavy breathing near the tent each one a reminder that evil often hides in ordinary places. The forest was beautiful by day, but by night it became a hunting ground. The third story carries the most chilling question. How can a voice sound exactly like someone you trust, yet be anything but? For a child to hear his mother calling, only to discover it was not her, is a betrayal of the senses themselves. And when parents refuse to explain, the silence becomes its own kind of terror. The fourth story shows how fear follows you home. A man on the street, smiling, pretending to be harmless, but revealing he knows where you live. That fear did not end when she ran, or even when the police came. It seeped into the walls of her house until they had to leave entirely. Because once someone says, "I see you up there," you can never unhear it. So what do we take from all this? We learn that vigilance is not paranoia, it's survival. Do not ignore strange sounds. Do not assume that every voice is what it seems. Trust your instincts, even if others laugh it off. Lock your doors. Be aware of your surroundings. And most importantly, never assume that the daylight will erase what the darkness revealed, because safety is not guaranteed. It is earned, guarded, and often fragile. These stories are a warning, not just tales meant to scare. They are reminders of the price we pay for letting our guard down and the cost of believing that evil always looks like evil. If you want to hear more true accounts of the terrifying moments that people live through, moments that change them forever, then you are in the right place. Welcome to The Price Paid. Subscribe now and join us as we explore the shadows where fear lives, so you can learn the lessons others had to learn the hard way. Because one day, you might face the same silence, the same footsteps, the same voice, and you'll need to know what to do.